Hi, all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy, and the subjects can get saucy. So, if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted chats with some of the most interesting culinary voices in the American South. This region is one of the country's vacation and retirement playgrounds. But beyond the warm weather and beautiful scenery, there's a rich culture steeped in community and often dark and complicated history, and plenty of innovation among the tradition. I'm Stephanie Burt, and I've spent a career covering this region for magazines, newspapers, and websites. And to me, the best introduction to the American South is through its food culture and the growers and makers who make it delicious. I invite you to come on the road with me from the Appalachian Mountains to the clear waters of the Gulf of Mexico and everywhere in between. I'm always hungry for that next bite, thirsty for the next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is supported today by an anonymous donor. Thank you for making the show possible. Deborah Freeman is the creator of Setting the Table, a multi-award-winning podcast exploring Black foodways and culinary history that in 2023 was honored by the International Association of Culinary Professionals as Podcast of the Year. She's also a colleague in the food writing world, with contributions to Eater, Condé Nast Traveler, and Garden & Gun, and is the food editor for Richmond's Style Weekly. We sat down via Zoom to talk about our most recent project, Finding Edna Lewis, a new docuseries for Virginia Public Media that explores the life of the Black female trailblazer who was a celebrated chef and author. As a proud Virginia native, Deb champions Virginia foodways and the power of personal history as a through line in food that can teach us about ourselves and connect us to our ancestors. It's something that Edna Lewis's work illustrates, and the kind of work Deb is doing in the world too. Therefore, here's another Southern Fork Sustenance conversation, diving deep into the foundational why when it comes to the power of food. What a joy to say this. Welcome to the Southern Fork, Deb Freeman.
I've been waiting. I'm so happy to be here.
All you had to do was ask.
I'm fangirling right now.
Oh my goodness. I'm fangirling too. So I think we must get over that so that people can actually hear a podcast today. But I've just been a fan of yours. I love your approach to food. I also really want to dig into that quickly and get started. I know that you really talk about the intersection of being Black, culture, and food ways. So I love intersection discussions because that's where I live too. I believe that food is very, very contextualized, and you and I were just chatting that you dropped down into the food rabbit hole and now, it's gotcha. So can you tell us what you did before that attracted you into this? Because most of us that are listening to the podcast and listen to your podcast know you from here, don't know you from before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of wild. So my background is in politics, actually. So my first job out of college was working for, unfortunately, the recently deceased Sheila Jackson Lee from the 18th District in Texas. And that was literally my first job. And from there, I did polling and campaigns and government relations work, nothing to do with food at all. But I think that my grandmother, who was someone who, when I was growing up, I lived with her as well as my mom. And when I came home from school, she was someone who had cooked every day. And so chicken dumplings or meatloaf or, macaroni and cheese, whatever it was. And so I would always run home to be like, what does she make? So that's always been in the back of my mind, even, being interested in food and curious about food. But I never thought about that as work or a job or even something that I would do. It never occurred to me. Fast forward to 7 years ago when I wrote my first article about food, that was when the light bulb went off. But yeah, my background is in communications and politics, completely different world.
Well, I would say not 100% completely different because you have to navigate a lot of nuances in that world. And one thing that I really respect about you is you're a queen of the nuance. You don't do these big, broad sweeps. And that makes you very engaging to listen to, very engaging to read. So I think that background, even though it does feel far away from you, it's not. It is very much understanding that interplay between people and the forces that shape them, right? So
That's true. Yeah.
You talk a lot about education. I think you first came on my radar with the Bradford watermelon. You went down the watermelon path of all of these seeds, and you and your husband started growing all of these different watermelons. And of course, I'm in South Carolina, and Bradford watermelon we know a bunch about. So you came on my radar there, and I just loved how you run personal experiments. Like you're not just a professional, you're running experiments in your home. What has this journey thus far taught you about your own personal culture? Because we're learning that authentic is authentic to us and our personal combined experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, as I mentioned with my grandmother, food in my mind was just something to be enjoyed, something that, if it's a special occasion, if you're feeling sad, if it's a great day, whatever it is, food was just a monumental part of my life and growing up. But I never thought about it in terms of place and culture. And I think that writing about this sort of thing for all these years has really kind of grounded me in where I've come from and where I grew up and being proud of where I grew up. I mean, I think that when you think about Virginia, you don't necessarily think about standout Southern foods. I mean, other places have gotten way better marketing of their foods. And so, you kind of think, oh, well, I'm from Virginia, but I have to go here to get barbecue, or I have to go here to get, whatever dish. And all of these things were right here for me. And I think that it really makes me appreciate where I am, where I came from. I don't think I quite had that before.
Right. I know that feeling. Also, too, you probably cook differently than you cooked before.
100%, 100%. Now it's like, now I don't get to cook as much as I'd like to. To be fair, I'm not an amazing cook. I do all right. But now it's like I can hear my grandmother in the background where I don't think I really was thinking about that. But now I'm thinking about how much sugar does she add? How did she season this? And then that leads me to the next step of thinking about generational cooking and where she learned that from. And I'm clearly not the only person that gets in a kitchen and thinks about, their family and how they cooked. I'm not the only one. And that just kind of makes me feel like food is just that touchstone for all of us, that I think that if you just peel back one layer, you'll find so much.
Yeah. And I have to pause and tell you a story just for a minute because this keys into, I'll try to keep this edited, which I can't promise. I'm the blabber. Grandmothers had City Granny and Country Granny, and I've mentioned them before, but City Granny never really cooked much. She cooked roast beef, and she would cook Christmas Eve for us. But for the most part, they went out to a city cafeteria every day. She wasn't known as a good cook. She didn't really get joy from cooking, from what I could see. And my Country Granny really did. Well, after their deaths, I learned a lot more about City Granny through a lot of research that I was doing. And I realized, well, number one, I always knew she was an orphan in the 1930s,
Hmm.
but she was at a working orphanage and she was on the kitchen team. So she
Wow.
cooked from 6 years old until she graduated school. So you might not want to cook anymore either.
That, first of all, that is such a great story. And I think that's so interesting how your past influences what you're doing, and when you dig a little bit deeper and you find out, it makes perfect sense why she would go out every day. Why on earth
Right.
would you
Because
subject
she
yourself
cooked
to cooking?
vats.
Yeah.
She did industrial cooking as a
Oh my
child.
gosh.
And so I really dug in and researched that. My mom told me just randomly, we called her Mama. She said, I got rid of Mama's recipe box. I recycled all of the recipes that she clipped.
Oh wow.
I lost it on the
Yeah.
phone. I was like, you can't do that. She was like, she didn't cook. And I was like, but that is archaeology. I can learn more about what she wanted to clip. And
Great.
my mom for Christmas surprised me by digging all that stuff out of the recycling, never telling me that she got it out, put it in a baggie, and it was one of my gifts.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I just started crying, crying, crying. Because that archaeology is part of who I am, and
Yes.
your grandmother's cooking and how she is choosing that amount of sugar is part of you. And
Hmm.
somehow that's our archaeology, especially as women, when a lot of our archaeology is this ephemera
That's right.
that isn't recorded. It's a lot of personal archaeology. And you really focus on Virginia, which has so many different areas. What area did you grow up in, Deb?
Yeah, so it's so funny that you say that, and I'll answer that question. But I recently found out through ancestry.com, I looked at my grandmother's marriage license, and she wrote her profession down as cook. I don't know where she cooked. I don't know how long
Oh
she
my
cooked.
goodness.
So
Right.
like this entire time I thought, she was just amazing. It just kind of comes from, maybe my great grandmother or something. She was a cook. That was her job. And I had no idea. I had no idea, but just kind of wanted to add the things that you learn just from one document. It's fascinating to me. But I grew up in Hampton Roads. So if anyone knows anything about Virginia, it's the coastal area. So Virginia Beach, Norfolk. I grew up in Norfolk, not Norfolk, as I often say.
Really? Norfolk.
Yeah, it is not Norfolk. If you say Norfolk, I'm going to throw something. But yeah, it's,
I don't want you to break your computer.
well, not you specific, you
I was
general. Anyway,
I was today years old when I learned that. Okay.
yeah, it's Norfolk. And so there's a lot of jokes about that because you can't really say that on television, but that's where I'm from. And it's a coastal area, so a lot of seafood, and the Tidewater area is what used to be called. And so Williamsburg isn't that far away, Jamestown. So a lot of kind of these first food traditions in America, we weren't that far away from that growing up.
Now, did you know about Edna Lewis when you were starting out in food? I understand where Edna Lewis came into my psyche because I'm in Charleston. And so she
Hmm.
was cooking at Middleton Place. Did you have a reference of her growing up in Virginia, or was it just when you started in food?
Yeah, it was when I started in food. And so as I was kind of thinking about Virginia's contributions to food history, obviously she's one of the first people that I read about and was thinking, how did I not know this? I grew up maybe 2.5 hours from where Freetown, Virginia was, and had no idea about Freetown, about Edna Lewis, and really was shocked and amazed at her story and her journey. And I think that a lot of people actually discover her. I like to use that language because she's just right there. She's just, kind of right out of sight, just a smidge. And every time I've talked to someone about Edna Lewis, that word discovery is the word that naturally comes for everyone, because she just kind of, it's like a switch that goes on once you start reading and learning about her.
Now, I know people are going to ask this question. So did you pitch this show, or did these people come to you, PBS come to you?
Yeah, it's so funny. So it's a combination of the two. So I received an email essentially from Field Studio, the folks there, Hannah Ayer and Lance Warren, and they heard me on a different podcast talking about there needs to be an Edna Lewis documentary. Why is there no documentary HBO prestige show? Where is it? I was ranting and raving about it, apparently. And so they sent an email over and said, hey, we think this is a fabulous idea. Can we talk about this? We met over tacos. Very quickly, I said yes. And then we pitched it, and they were kind enough to say yes.
In 7 years, you've worked in 3 mediums. Which one is your favorite? Do you have a favorite that you enjoy, or how do they all interact in your creative brain?
I mean, I think it all starts from writing, which is my favorite, because I find writing to be alchemy. It starts in your brain, and then all of a sudden you've got this, this document in front of you that was just in your head, a few hours ago. But that's how they're all connected. I mean, the podcast, Setting the Table, was a ton of research, a ton of writing and going through scripts and thinking about what might resonate. And that is carrying through to this documentary, Finding Edna Lewis, that we're working on, even though a lot of it is visual. And so that is definitely something that's new to me. But thinking about what words to use, thinking about what would make a viewer more interested in what I'm saying, I'm constantly thinking about words. So that's really the through line between all of those categories.
What are some words you wish were not used in food writing? I have a list. I'm sure you can come up with a few.
Fusion. I think fusion is my number one. I just we can do better.
What is fusion? I mean, are we nuclear reactors? What's going on over here?
I don't understand. I am completely at a loss every time I read fusion. I also think when someone says, oh, what kind of restaurant is that? Oh, that's an American restaurant. What does that mean? Because there's so many facets to, Midwestern food, or Southwestern food, or what does that mean? I think we need to stop saying.
I think it means chili cheese fries is what I think it means.
I mean, maybe I don't know,
I know, right. You hate these kind of nebulous labels, right?
Let's be specific. I'm a Virgo. Let's be specific and drill down into what we're really talking about.
Yes. And I have been the queen of the listicles, okay? For certain beer. I'm not a queen right now, but I have been crowned. I've had some crowns. And that can make you really lazy as a writer, because you're doing these tiny snippets. So I end up finding, for me, words that are very lazy, which I think fusion is a lazy word, but they're words that bleed over from social media, like swoon-worthy, perfectly roasted. Like, what does that mean? Perfectly roasted? Like, what am I saying? Like, and I usually don't find that until my editors are like, Steph, what's up with this?
No, totally.
But I think my number one has always been foodie.
Tell me why. I'd like to hear more about that.
I believe that it is a demeaning term for somebody who pays a lot of attention to food, which is a cultural totem, just like a music critic or an art historian. And we have words for them, but when it comes to food, we diminish the power of food because it's ubiquitous in our lives, I think. I also think it's mixed up with women's work and, that history of the newspaper columns. I talked a lot about this with Sarah Franklin, who, of course, wrote the editor and had, on Judith Jones. And we talked briefly about Edna Lewis, but I don't think foodie sells it. It's like, of course I'm a fan of food. I'm a human. I like to eat. We're geared that way. I do take umbrage at that because I do take what I do seriously. I take what you do seriously. And I do know the amount of research in it. And it isn't just a personal opinion on a runny egg. There's a lot of cultural context to it.
No, absolutely. And I think social media has kind of made it worse because anyone can say that they're a foodie, because what does that even mean? Right. So to your point, a foodie is someone who likes food. Okay, well, tell me more because that's not enough. But yeah, I think that anyone with an iPhone who likes to go to a restaurant can be a foodie. Yeah.
Yes. And a few years ago, because I've been in the podcast game a little bit longer, people that didn't understand podcasts would often explain me as a blogger.
Oh my God. That is the biggest
Do you get that?
pet peeve on the planet. Oh my.
I'm so glad we're bonding over this. I'm so happy.
Oh my God. I bristle every time someone says, oh, so you're a blogger. No. And the way I think you just said is correct with that. It takes away your credibility. It takes away all of the years of research and writing and work that goes on to it. It diminishes it to something casual, I think, which in the case, if you consider yourself a professional, it can be insulting.
Right. So where are some of the places that you wish more people knew about Virginia, since you have this platform and you've spent years now teaching us? What are some places that you feel or dishes or people that you still feel are underrepresented? It's just such a big state. And to be honest, I've barely dipped into it as a Southern Fork, and it's just like right up there. Like I could get there in 4 hours, but I've gone south a lot more than I've gone north. And I would love to know some places that we should have on our radar, even as your greatest hits.
Yeah, so first one that comes to mind is, and I'm going to mention barbecue because in case anyone who's listening has not talked to me or listened to me, I think I'm contractually obligated to say that the birthplace of American barbecue is in Virginia. I think that's like my tagline. It'll be on my gravestone probably, but I would definitely have to say Original Ronnie's Barbecue, which is in Verina, Virginia. That's about 15 minutes outside of Richmond. They just have an incredible menu. It's only on weekends, but you have to go on Sundays for their macaroni and cheese. It is the best macaroni and cheese I've had. And I've had all the mac and cheese up and down the South, East Coast, wherever, is honestly the best. Also, speaking about barbecue, I would say Polly's Pig Out, which is in Afton, Virginia, heading up to the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's just on the side of the road. You would pass it if you didn't see it. Huge smokers just on the side of the road. Their specialty is ribs. They are excellent. Gosh, well, something else I think a lot of people don't think about, or you have even heard about, is something called fried crab. So a lot of people think of fried crab as the fried kind of soft shell crab, which is very popular in Hampton Roads, Virginia. So in Norfolk, where I grew up, there are fried crabs, and you would go to a place called Eddie's Crab Shack, and really it's shell on. It's steamed first, deep fried in batter. You put vinegar and hot sauce on it. And so when you're cracking the crab, you've got all of this fried batter, salty, tangy goodness. And then then that's the, so you've got this batter that's salty and tangy, and then the contrast of that with the sweetness of the blue crab. Incredible. Very few places do it. That is definitely something that comes out of the African American tradition in that Tidewater area, but is honestly one of the best things you're going to eat. Period. It's delicious.
Well, you've got to come down this way because Charleston's known for garlic crab,
Tell
which
me
is
about the
very
garlic crab.
similar. So it comes out of the African American Gullah Geechee tradition as well. And it's fried, except deep fried and then garlic butter. And so that fried and the butter and yeah, that's good.
Girl.
It's super
Oh my
messy and
God.
good.
That sounds,
Yeah.
is there batter on it or no? Okay, I'm taking it back. I have to get on a plane or in a car.
Let me know, please.
Yes, ma'am.
And we will coordinate garlic crab tour for you.
Yes.
That's wonderful. But that gets back to this idea, right? That there's a lot of through lines. Like you're talking about mac and cheese as through lines, and you've had so many mac and cheeses, and what makes that one perfect for you, and the garlic crab and the barbecue. These are things that I think a lot about because the Southern Fork is about defining Southern food now. And so, how do you see Southern food versus regional food? I mean, because they overlay each other.
First of all, I think Virginia gets left out of the conversation almost all the time when it comes to Southern food. And, you see a lot of discourse online where folks are saying, Virginia's not really the South. That boggles my imagination, first of all, for so many reasons. But Virginia is definitely Southern, just because in Northern Virginia, there are folks who are not necessarily stereotypically Southern or didn't grow up here. And there are a lot of transplants because of its proximity to DC. But that's just a tiny portion of the state. And so when you think about regionality and Southern food, I mean, there is overlap, but there definitely are things that are very distinctive pockets. And that's obviously based on terrain, what ingredients grown in one place versus in another. Obviously rice in South Carolina, it's something that's not something for us that's this massive deal because it wouldn't grow well here, and that's obviously historical. So I think that goes back to the earlier point about being specific, right? Because it's very easy to say Southern food, and it's very difficult to say what is Virginia, what is from South Carolina, what is Geechee Gullah. That's where people have to do a little work to kind of get to that place, which I find most foodies aren't. And that is perpetuating that kind of Southern ideal without understanding the roots and where it comes from. And that's really a huge part of what I'm trying to do, is really make people understand that there's a huge diversity of Southern food. What you guys have there is completely different than what we have here, which is completely different from Alabama, any other kind of Southern state. And so really trying to define our region so that people understand and appreciate that area more.
And that's really what Edna Lewis gave us. She
Oh my God.
defined Freetown, and she grounded her cooking in Freetown and those seasons of that seasonality. I'm not going to ask you to give away too much of the documentary, but can you talk about, as we move into the shoulder season of late summer, early fall, we start to get the chow chows, and we start to get the peas, the beans, and a lot more. Do you have some favorite recipes from her, or dishes that come to mind that really connect to this time of year and her place in Virginia?
I mean, that's so hard to narrow down, right? Because there are so many dishes. And during this time of year, you're starting to, can things, and you're starting to put things up for the fall and winter.
It's more of her storytelling this time of year, maybe.
Right. And so for her, it's just like, when you read her cookbook, particularly The Taste of Country Cooking, you can really see what her family and what she is doing based on the season. And it's all of this beautiful prose about Freetown and, not just what they're eating, but why. And I think that's incredibly important because that wasn't something that was seen at the time. That there's a nuance there to pick up on your earlier phrase about writing and how someone sees food. But for me, because I'm not much of a canner, I tried once and failed miserably. I kind of skipped this little portion because that's a lot of work. I'm not very good at it. But if we want to talk about favorite recipes, I will tell you one that I was blown away by, which was there's a quail dish with grapes that I was blown away by the simplicity of the dish, but yet how flavorful and complex it was all at the same time. I think there were 6 ingredients, and yet you would have thought that it was something that had sat all day and, had been roasted or cooked for a very long period of time. And really, it was just kind of pan fried and delicious. And I think that's really indicative of her food, that it's about quality ingredients at the right time, using them at the right time to get the best possible dish. We talk about farm to table, and now everyone just automatically knows what that means. But she's really one of the earliest, spearheaders of that without it being called farm to table. Because
Yeah.
for her, it was just what she knew and what she did, going to the farmer's market when she was in New York, or going out to, see what her neighbors had or what's in her backyard on the farm where she grew up. That was second nature to her. And that's something that I think today we take for granted, because technically you can get a strawberry in February. Should you be eating a strawberry in February? Probably not. But I think that she is really one of those people who makes us think about what we're eating and when, and how important that is to the entire food experience.
And even if you say, I don't know why I eat what I eat, or it doesn't matter what I eat, or I don't care about what I eat, that is a reason too.
Mm-hmm.
So if you choose not to think about it, it's also a reason why you're eating what you're eating. So
absolutely. It's a choice.
We have about 3 minutes left. And so I'm going to end with this last question, which is my magic picnic basket question, Deb. I would love to build you a picnic basket. I am so grateful to finally have you on the show. In this picnic basket, I can put some of your favorite things. I can go back and ask anybody to make one more bite of something you would love. I can source for you. I can't grow Bradford watermelons. I don't have that kind of patience, but I can cook a little bit. So I would love to put some things in that basket for you today that just bring you life. Since I don't believe in the death penalty, instead, I want to bring you some things that really just light you up. What can I put in that basket for you?
Oh my goodness. So anything my grandmother made, like it doesn't even matter. I think of her often, and I'm choking up a little bit because she was such an influence on me, and I didn't realize what she would mean to my life's work, which is working in food. I didn't realize that until much later. So her chicken pastry, which is chicken dumplings, but she called it chicken pastry. So I would absolutely have to have that. Her cornbread, which I have never been able to replicate. I have tried so many times, and it's always wrong. It's always wrong every single time. Gosh, her turkey wings with gravy and rice. Like, I just like naming the hits. Her collard greens, which she put white potatoes in her collard greens and let cook it, which a lot of people don't do, but that was something that she did, which is incredible. Gosh, what else? Her potato salad, her chicken salad, her crab cakes. All of that would just be insane. That would be, if I could have a magic picnic basket, all of those things would be it.
Amazing. Well, if people want to learn more about Deb Freeman, there is no way you can avoid her if you Google it, because she's all over the internet. Thanks to Whetstone Media, thanks to her beautiful podcast, Setting the Table, her beautiful new Edna Lewis documentary, which I've had the chance to take a little peek of and can't wait to watch the whole thing. I also know that you have a piece this month in Gravy, right? This particular issue of Gravy magazine.
It's a throwback. I actually wrote that a couple of years ago, but it was about the Bradford, of course, and my journey through watermelons. And that was a really fun piece to write. So
it's a beautiful piece of writing.
Thank you.
We are around in concentric circles each other, and I respect you so much, Deb. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank
you.
I
hope more of you Southern Fork listeners listen to her. So
thank you so much. This was great.
You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?